You pull out your phone to navigate somewhere you've been 3 times before. Not because you're lost, because you're not entirely sure, and the phone is faster than thinking. You follow the blue arrow. You arrive. You put the phone away. And here is what you did not do. You did not look at the sun. You did not notice which direction the wind was coming from. You did not register that the slope of the ground has been tilting slightly east for the last kilometer. You did not smell the salt. That means the coast is closer than the map shows. You received a coordinate and followed it. Now, consider this. Roughly 50,000 years ago, a group of modern humans crossed an open stretch of ocean, the Timor Sea, in hand-built watercraft, navigating by stars, current, wind, and wave pattern, and landed in Australia. No instruments, no maps, no accumulated cartographic tradition to draw from. They found a continent they had never seen. They landed. They stayed. And over the next 50,000 years, their descendants built one of the most sophisticated spatial cognition systems ever documented, a mental map of an entire continent encoded not in paper or data, but in song. The question is not how they did it without GPS. The question is what they had instead that GPS will never replicate. The answer isn't one thing. It's in the hippocampus, in infrasound, in the star paths of the Caroline Islanders, and in what happens to spatial cognition when you stop using it. Each layer is more surprising than the last. Let's go. Start with the assumption that ancient navigation was guesswork, that before instruments, people wandered and occasionally got lucky. This assumption is not just wrong, it is the inverse of the truth. The navigational systems developed by pre-instrument human cultures were not approximations of modern GPS. They were different technologies entirely, operating on different principles, accessing different information streams, and in several measurable ways outperforming what satellite navigation can do. David Lewis, the physician and sailor who spent years in the 1960s and 70s sailing the Pacific with traditional Polynesian and Micronesian navigators, documented in the Navigators published in 1972, a system of extraordinary complexity. Micronesian navigators of the Caroline Islands, practitioners of a system called ETAC, did not think of themselves as moving through space toward a fixed destination. They conceptualized the canoe as stationary and the islands as moving past it. The navigator tracked the movement of reference islands against a star compass, a memorized grid of 32 star rise and set points around the horizon, updating their position continuously through the night. They read wave patterns generated by islands up to 30 kilometers away, specific swell refraction signatures that identify particular islands even when the islands are below the horizon and invisible. They detected phosphorescent plankton streaks in the water that indicate current boundaries. They smelled land vegetation on wind shifts 20 kilometers out. These were not heuristics. They were precise, codified, teachable skills that allowed navigators to cross 2,000 kilometers of open Pacific and arrive at islands a few kilometers wide consistently, deliberately, with the confidence of someone reading a road sign. Here's where it gets strange. The navigational capacity that made these feats possible is not cultural alone. It has a biological substrate, and the biology is degrading in populations that stop using it. Eleanor Maguire at University College London published a landmark study in 2000 in PNAS, showing that London taxi drivers, who at the time memorized the entire street layout of London, over 25,000 roads before GPS existed, had measurably larger posterior hippocampi than matched controls. The hippocampus is the brain's primary spatial mapping structure. It grows in response to navigational demand. Maguire followed the same drivers longitudinally and found that the longer they had been driving, the more years of active spatial mapping, the larger the relevant hippocampal region. In 2013, she published follow-up data showing that taxi drivers who switched to GPS-assisted navigation after years of self-navigation showed measurable reduction in hippocampal gray matter density over subsequent years. The brain structure that supports spatial memory shrinks when you stop demanding it. This is not a metaphor. The hippocampus is a use-it-or-lose-it organ. And modern GPS-dependent humans are, on average, using it substantially less than any human population in history. The navigational capacity that got humans across the Timor Sea is being systematically underexercised by every generation that grows up with a blue arrow telling them where to turn. Now, let's talk about what the brain actually does during natural navigation, because it is far more sophisticated than following a route. John O'Keefe at University College London, who won the Nobel Prize in Physiology in 2014, discovered place cells in the hippocampus in 1971, neurons that fire specifically when an animal is in a particular location, creating a neural map of space that updates continuously as the animal moves. May-Britt and Edvard Moser at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology discovered grid cells in the entorhinal cortex in 2005 neurons, arranged in hexagonal firing patterns that function as a metric coordinate system, telling the brain not just where it is, but how far it has moved in which direction. Together, place cells and grid cells constitute a biological GPS system of extraordinary precision, one that integrates visual landmarks, self-motion signals, vestibular input, and odor gradients into a continuously updated spatial representation. This system evolved over hundreds of millions of years of vertebrate navigation. It works in complete darkness. It works underwater. It works in 3 dimensions. It works without satellites. What it requires is active use, real movement through real space, with attention directed at the spatial environment. Every time you follow GPS directions without attending to your surroundings, you are running the system in passive mode. The hardware is there, the software is running, but the map is not being built. Here's something else that almost never comes up: the song lines. Bruce Chatwin brought the term to wide attention in 1987, but the system itself is far older: the Aboriginal Australian network of navigational songs that encode routes across the entire continent of Australia in musical form. Each song is a sequence of landmarks described in verse: a rock formation, a waterhole, a tree of a specific species, a particular constellation at a particular time of year, and the songs connect to form paths called dreaming tracks that cross the continent in every direction. The songs are not metaphor, they are maps. Sung in sequence at the correct tempo, they produce a reliable navigational route across thousands of kilometers of landscape. David Nash, at the Australian National University, and colleagues studying the songline system, documented routes that have been verified against satellite mapping to be accurate within the resolution of the song's landmark descriptions. Across terrain, the composers navigated on foot, without instruments, possibly 50,000 years ago. The system also encodes ecological information: which waterholes are seasonal, which plant species indicates underground water, which rock type produces reliable flint. The song is simultaneously navigation, ecology, history, and law. It is the most information-dense navigational system ever created by a human culture, and it exists entirely in working memory, transmitted across generations through oral performance. No database, no server, no signal required. So here's the part nobody tells you. The loss of navigational skill in GPS-dependent populations is not just a cognitive curiosity. It is a measurable public health issue. Veronique Bobat at McGill University published research in 2012 showing that people who rely primarily on GPS for navigation show reduced hippocampal gray matter and increased caudate nucleus activity, meaning they shift from spatial mapping to stimulus response navigation, the same system used for habit formation. Caudate dominant navigation is efficient for familiar routes. It is catastrophically brittle in novel environments. When the GPS fails, when the satellite signal drops, when the phone dies, when the disaster scenario removes the infrastructure, caudate dominant navigators are genuinely, measurably more helpless than spatial map navigators in identical environments. The Caroline Islander navigator who reads wave refraction to find an island below the horizon does not become lost when the technology fails. There is no technology to fail. The map is in the hippocampus. It has been there since before the island was named. You pull out your phone. The blue arrow tells you where to turn. You arrive. You put the phone away. Somewhere in your posterior hippocampus, a place cell that was waiting to fire did not fire. A grid cell that was ready to update did not update. A map that your ancestors built across 50,000 years of open ocean crossings, desert traversals, and continental-scale songline navigation sat unused for another day. The capacity is there. The hardware has not changed since the Timor Sea crossing. It is waiting, exactly as it has always been, for you to put the phone down and look up to notice the slope of the ground, to feel which direction the wind is coming from, to look at the sun and know, without thinking about it, which way is east. You were built for this. You have simply forgotten that you were.